Hello one and all, and welcome to this diary bitty. Okay, so on the left, which I need to point the wrong direction there, on the left there's Karen Strawn, theoretically anti-feminist, used to run a radio station, I think called the Honey Badgers. And she was one of the darlings of the anti-feminist side, so to speak. She's a Canadian lady from Alberta, or at least she lives in Alberta, I think Calgary. And she's a fairly chap-like lady. But yeah, she's a fairly sharp lady. Now, on the other side, there, we have a very dangerous man. And his name is Christopher Cantwell. Now, Christopher Cantwell used to run a radio station as well on the internet called The Radical Agenda. That's the one. And what happened to him, I think right now, is he is in prison. And in this very video, I believe he says that he was going to turn himself in on the following day. Now, this video followed a protest that happened in Charleston, I believe, and he participated in this protest. And in this protest, there was either a manslaughter or a homicide done with a vehicle. I think it was a Dodge Challenger or Charger, I can't remember. I think it was grey. Some random fellow ran over a counter-protester, I believe. Now, that's very much a setting the stage. It doesn't tell us much. I want to set the stage a little bit more about Christopher Cantwell, because Christopher Cantwell is now, I believe, in jail for assault. Now, Christopher Cantwell is a fairly hothead. He was a hothead before. It's my understanding that he started in the working for A Voice for Men, writing for A Voice for Men. A Voice for Men was a blog, or potentially also radio station, I'm not sure, run by Paul, I can't remember. And it's basically sort of an anti-feminist or more like pro-male site. That was one of the OGs arguing that male rights, particularly in family courts, are by now so eroded that it can hardly be called justice, essentially. I don't remember his name now. Paul. I'm fairly sure it's Paul, but I can't remember his last name. Sorry. Anyway, bear in mind, this was like almost 10 years ago now. I think this video is 8 years old or something like that. Anyway. And then what happened is that Cantwell, as a libertarian, moved to New Hampshire to try and follow that idea of the new free world that they were trying to create there, him and a couple of other libertarians. Sounds like a really clever idea. I don't think it probably went anywhere, but whatever, I don't know. Basically, they were trying to create their own version of Urania. And what happened is that he started realizing that all of the people that are in power, all of the narratives that are being pushed are fundamentally socialist or communist, and that all of the people who seem to sustain and support these types of ideas are not what the founding fathers would have called white people of good character. So after having spotted this, he then essentially accepted this fact. In fact, I believe in this particular video over here, we still don't see, this is still a pre-prison Cantwell. Post-prison Cantwell had a short stint in which he was even more radical, but certainly much more knowledgeable about this very topic because he studied it in depth while in the clink. Either way. So what is happening right now? What is this very specific scenario? This is a special moment in history. In a weird way, in this sort of internet world of ours. Why? Because today, in this video, is where Cantwell earned his moniker of the crying Nazi. Okay? Now, let's put a bit of context to that. So, Nazi is a term nowadays that the smears on the socialistic, collectivistic side consistently fling at essentially anybody who is even remotely not as extreme as themselves. Pretty much. So it very much depends on them, right? But everybody's a Nazi. In fact, it's quite funny that these two, Karen and Christopher, are in fact discussing, or were in fact discussing during this particular video, the fact that everybody was being named or called a Nazi, including Jewish people. Like Ben Shapiro was called a Nazi, Milo Yiannopoulos was called a Nazi, and Dave Rubin was called a Nazi. These are all Jews, and so the concept nothing works here, right? So that's just essentially a slur, all right? But the crying bit is interesting because all of the feminists, and generally speaking, whenever women are asked to give opinions about this sort of stuff, is they want a man, theoretically, that's what they say. It's obviously a lie, but let's go along with the theory that they want a man who is emotional and opens up. Well, what happened in this particular video that you're seeing now, that I'm about to play a bit of and then react to that, is the moment in which Christopher Cantwell, soon to become the crying Nazi, is going to demonstrate why he's crying. Okay? Or why he gets emotional about it. Because basically, him and Karen have just talked, and they are both worried about the future. Because when somebody like Christopher Cantwell can't express his opinion, what other recourse does he have other than some kind of violence, essentially? Because in fact, Cantwell used to use this sentence in The Radical Agenda. If I remember correctly, right at the beginning of the start of the show, there was a Jordan Peterson voice clip that he would play, where Jordan Peterson, a very, very moderate individual who would be as far away as possible from Christopher Cantwell for many reasons, he would say something like, what do you call people you cannot talk to? Enemies. And if you want more enemies, just keep doing what you're doing. That's roughly what Peterson had said and Cantwell had cut. Anyway, so 7 minutes of preamble turns out, but it's kind of important to set the stage. All right. So it's in this part of history of the internet. I'm now going to play what they say, and then we're going to see Christopher Cantwell transform into the crying Nazi, despite him actually showing emotions. It's apparently a reason to ridicule him because he's not manly enough. Remember, all of these people who use slurs and attack you or anybody else in this sort of like sophistic, bully-like way, they don't reason. This is just a way to attack you. It's as simple as that. Okay, so let's see what they say.
Right. So, like I don't know. I guess I'm just really saddened that it's starting to come to this, and like Allison, who's my co-host on Honey Badger Radio, said that she's hoping for a civil war because the other alternative appears to be genocidal violence, right? Like that's like you can have one or you can have the other, and it's just and it's really like I really do see your side of things, and I know you're getting emotional right now because it's.
No, I don't want that to happen. You know what I'm saying? I really fucking don't. That's what people are acting like I'm trying to cause that, and I'm really fucking trying to prevent it, and it fucking really upsets me. I'm sorry.
No, and I agree.
I think that's probably enough. We can stop this. So, Karen puts forward this idea that a friend of hers says, right, that that the only alternative to the non-dialogue and to not facing facts like differences between peoples and cultures and biological differences between races and this sort of stuff. Like one option, she says, is going to be is going to be civil war, and the other option is going to be something much more sinister than that. And as you can see, Christopher Cantwell seems to be very distraught by the idea of something more sinister than that. He's very unhappy about it. And there's many reasons for him to be very unhappy about it. He used to be, for example, together with a black woman in the past, who then the story didn't work out, but they were about to have a child together. Like all of us people, right, have a past and a future. And Christopher Cantwell is no different. And he developed to these ideas that are now so pernicious, apparently. Even though I have listened to several Radical Agenda podcasts, and outside of the somewhat strong rhetoric and the incessant swearing, which I actually emailed him about. He even responded to me. I told him, like, you really need to tone the swearing down. It's impossible for your content to be played anywhere around anybody younger, right? You're really not in control of your language here, so it certainly won't work as an example. Anyway, I'll set that aside. He did respond and he acknowledged it is a problem, but I don't think he did anything about it. So this is the first part of what I want to discuss, which is everybody from this point on starts attacking him. He's not just Nazi now, he's the crying Nazi. And the bullies do this, right? They just keep on bringing this to the fore and arguing essentially that he's such a loser, he's such a weakling for doing this. He's about to turn himself into the police and probably be arrested. I mean, say probably, we now know the history, but yes, he ends up getting arrested. I don't recall for what, it doesn't matter. I think it was a case of him defending himself with mace from constant attacks. You need to understand that, just like for Charlie Kirk and other individuals like this, individuals who have had strong opinions and different opinions for a long time, especially if they're relatively famous or relatively capable of riling up people, they get attacked mercilessly. Okay, I'll be covering various other people like this because I believe they deserve to be remembered, right? Anyway, but what happened to Christopher Cantwell, and this is where I want to take the second part of this video, is what followed. Here's what followed. Christopher Cantwell lost access to banking. He wasn't able to bank, so he was consistently promoting a cryptocurrency, I think called Monero, if I remember right. He was trying, it was the only way for him to receive donations and manage them in some way for his radio program. And he was taking calls and all sorts of stuff. And when he went to jail, he came back out of it a little bit calmer, I think, a little bit more intelligent. But he was being badgered and attacked absolutely relentlessly. This reminds me of something that the great and excellent Katie Hopkins said once, which is, they will push you and prod you and push you and prod you and prod you and push you until you react, until you swing, or until something snaps. I believe we are seeing this live in some individuals. For example, I think Candace Owens now is snapping. Like, she doesn't seem to be able to tell the difference between a conspiracy theory and reality anymore. So she's being repudiated by a bunch of people on quote unquote her side, and she's being attacked left, right, and center essentially constantly. You got people that survived this type of attack, like Nick Fuentes, who is able to sort of withstand the blows. But Cantwell, I think, was one of the individuals who was not able to withstand the blows. In fact, who knows, perhaps even my email to him where I asked him to attempt to control his language was part of this. Mine was certainly not intended in that way. But yeah, and he's not without fault, right? In fact, I believe now he's in the clink for assault, even though he claims he defended himself in the home. or he was trying to remove somebody who was in the home. I just read an article. It's impossible to find any information about it that is in any way reliable, because whenever you read any article about him, the crying Nazi is the first thing you're going to read. It's just, it is very annoying how the media is always completely useless or damaging. But that's an aside, right? The problem with Christopher Cantwell is the following. He started at a point in which he was unhappy with the situation. He was unhappy with how much tax he was paying. He was unhappy with the fact that there's so much desperation and misery around him, poverty, etc. He then proceeded to the next level where he tried to understand why all of this is happening. As he learned why things were happening, he started forming theories that are fundamentally verboten, and that's when we go to the next stage. Now that he's got verboten theories, he starts sharing the verboten theories and finds lots of support. Of course, support from dark places, because that's kind of anywhere you can be if you have ideas such as these by now, right? Then what happens is he starts getting attacked eternally by everybody, all the time. And now he can't go anywhere without being attacked. He can't bank, he can't save, he can't pay for things, right? And then the final stage is he essentially goes a little bit insane. And even though it's perfectly reasonable and perfectly sane for him to do this, it's a very big shame that it's legal and proper for witch hunts to exist in such a way that they will drive a witch to first be declared a witch and then demonstrate that they indeed are, when they are put in a corner in which they're either a witch or they are the devil and they have no other option. It's a tale as old as the world. So I'm sorry that this happened to him and to many other people to whom this has happened. It's wrong. This type of event is wrong. Bullying is wrong of this sort. Well, of any sort, I suppose, but yeah, I'm not really sure how to call it. Bullying sounds insufficiently strong of a term. Yeah. It's this type of rhetoric and this type of consistent attack on ideas and thoughts that leads to death's destruction and potentially a retaliation from the other side that is comparable to the retaliatory movements of World War II. I think something like the fascist movement or the National Socialist movement. These movements were born out of the same concept. You cannot talk, otherwise the commies will conk you on the head, because they think they have a right to do that, and the police don't do anything to protect the obvious victims. The governments then legislate out the capability of people to speak and think. The people who speak and think refuse to stop speaking and thinking. And eventually some figure rises up, manages to rile up sufficient people to then potentially do a putsch, take control of that government, and change the things in a very dramatic way, at which point a reckoning for what is going to be perceived to be the culprit is going to come. And it's going to be a grassroots movement as it was in World War II, as I understand it. And he is very sad. He is the crying Nazi because he doesn't want this to happen. I also don't want it to happen. I just have a sufficiently black heart or a disdain for emotional outbursts that I will not be seen crying. Certainly not in front of the internet. Certainly not in front of my children. So, that's the bit of history I wanted to share for these two interesting individuals who I think have faded into obscurity. One by choice, one by imprisonment. See ya.